conversation about, there's a lot of old farts over at the CEA, a lot of, you'll keep the PC.
Oh, and Digital Hollywood also.
You know, there's more over CEA, you know, because, I mean, they're really old. But they're basically, I come from an era like they did, where if you basically design something, it belonged to the company, so big deal. You know, if you do it and if they pay you, you know, okay, here's $10, you know, here's $10, you get a free lunch, we'll give you dinner also. And, okay, and that was it. You went in, did it, that was it. My father was the same way, but what happened was in the, here's one, you know, the great Republican leader Ronald Reagan helped found the Screen Actors Guild. And folks, he was a socialist, folks. My God, he was a left-wing socialist, as was a lot of the people then. Everybody that joined, I think all the founders of the Screen Actors Guild were socialists. They thought that the people were being damaged heavily by the companies. Well, the union, the Screen Actors Guild Union and the other unions helped destroy the studio system, which basically nurtured all of the young performers along. There would be no Rock Hudsons today, no Tab Hunters.
There probably wouldn't have been a
No
Ronald
Kirk
Reagan.
Douglases. There'd been no Ronald Reagan. There'd have been, you would not have seen Errol Flynn. I mean, you put it this way. Olivia Havilland, who's actually a cousin of Errol Flynn's, said, you think they'd have put a 15-year-old boy and a 14-year-old girl in a feature film if it wasn't for the studio system? They wanted to bring, they knew they had a couple of hot stars. They were too young, but they looked older. And they made careful, there was no smooching between the two of them folks until they got to be adults. Yeah, and but then, I don't think they even held hands for years. He would be shy and, you know, around her, she'd hate him, which generally boys and girls of that age do a lot.
They do that, that's about that
But
age.
they nurtured him along. In the same way, I was a product of the studio system in my own way, because they knew I knew my father was in the business, my grandmother was in the business, and that I was a floater, which means I was available to come in whenever something was needed. That's why I did so many parts. So I'd be on their checklist because it was a studio system. Today they really can't do that as much because you have to have union cards to go into these things. And if you work if you work in a studio zone and you don't pick yourself up a union card after doing the union project, you don't work in a studio zone anymore. So it was differential to it. So what has happened is that TV came along, and they got screwed royal over television rights for a while, and then they hit with a massive strike. And then I remember James Coburn telling me once I was on a movie set to do a TV show he was doing. He said, "Yeah, I just got 15 cents in my last residual check." He said, "What the hell is this?" He said, "It cost me more money to go over to put it in the bank than I got, because what happens is then I get well, Jennifer Aniston got $52 million for doing her role the last season of Friends." Well, no, when it hit the rerun bit, she got the full salary a second time. And it goes backwards until on more times it plays, the less you get. But in my era, if they give you $52, that's what you got, $52. Now, if they give you $1 million, expect that $1 million again. I mean, like Johnny Depp, like he gets $20 million plus X amount off the top and merchandising, and he gets X amount every time it's across a different platform. That's how the contracts read today. And imagine, you can understand why a third-party attacks are horrific in the industry at the moment. People that worked on the projects, I mean, it's lost, I think, $14 million. A group lost in Australia because some guy went ding, 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 ding.
Are you serious? On a riff?
Yeah, a riff. His riff was on it without his permission. And he said, "But it wasn't on the record." "Well, you didn't ask my permission to put it on MTV 10 years ago. The group didn't even exist anymore.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, they're not even existing anymore. The courts ruled that you did not have a contract for digital media. Well, digital media contracts didn't exist. Most people don't remember Hopalong Cassidy or Roy Rogers or Gene Autry. The Cisco Kid, played by Duncan Rinaldo. You know what these people did, like in the late 1930s, early 1940s?
What?
They hawked their houses, their shirts, to buy the television rights to something that didn't even exist. So guess what happened when 1948 come along? All of a sudden, William Boyd became a very rich man. Roy Rogers became a very rich man. Gene Autry became a very rich man. You know, I mean, one of my relatives was Jack Starrett, the Durango Kid. He actually owned all the TV rights to the 100 and some shows he did, the movies. And he used to go around the country holding the Durango Kid film festivals on television locally. He'd host a show. And I mean, an example, people remember the Avengers with Patrick Macnee. Patrick Macnee, basically, he did the Alistair Slim's version of the Christmas Carol. He played, he played the husband of his sister, who he adored, that Alistair Sim adored. He actually picked up the television rights to that thing. The TV rights, and there was virtually no TV in 1952. And he just stuck it in his back pocket. And then guess what happened about 20 years later after the Avengers were off? Mr. Macnee started hosting an annual Christmas show with his movie that could not be played anywhere else because you don't have the rights to show my movie. And every year he'd sit down and talk about his family, and that he didn't realize it was going to become like this. Well, he made it like that by bringing it out every year at Christmas. The same thing. You know that MGM didn't own the television rights to Wizard of Oz.
Are you serious?
That's why it was on network television for so long. It took like 50 years to get the rights back for MGM. That's why you only see it on Turner now, because MGM got the library back and the library was sold to Turner. It's the same thing, a lot of people, they did not think of that. I mean, the digital rights, they got, I know that Lucas has been going crazy buying digital rights.
Well, it's expensive.
Yeah,
very expensive. But part of it is it's important because if they don't have the rights, then they don't have the right to broadcast it. Well, and the rights pertain to, of course, the actors.
Yeah.
Right?
The same thing.
Could you imagine, it's like, if you look at the credits of some of these movies, okay, how many people are on those credits and you gotta get all their permission?
Yeah, I got all the permission. Years ago.
It's like if you don't get it up front, see, part of it is if you don't get it up front, it's hard to get it. But the challenge is if that platform did not exist when you made it, you don't know to get it.
An actor that a lot of people, remember Parnell Roberts who played Anna on the Bonanza. Parnell Roberts hated horses. They always put him, as my father said, they put him horse shit in ordnance movies because he was a good cowboy. But he totally hated horses. So he left the show. He sold the rights to his, the residuals and stuff over to the other members of the cast for a lump sum of money. Guess what happened when digital come along?
What? They all became very wealthy?
Well, they became wealthy, but Mr. Roberts, who was a very good businessman, I don't see digital rights mentioned. And you people have been selling this without my permission. 162 episodes went 162. That was everything that he was in. They vanished. And they have been renegotiating a lot of things like that.
162, that's a lot.
162 episodes. That's a lot of money. And they, the same thing. They re-recorded the track of the that was removed for the digital releases because Stuart, what's his name, Rose, who wrote the theme song, they didn't have his permission to put it on digital. They had a permission for records and for television and for sale overseas for records and television.
Can't they prevent that from going and just saying all rights reserved?
All rights reserved at that period. All the rights, the work is specifically all rights that are known at that moment. It says all rights reserved 1966.
So all rights known at that moment.
Known at that moment. When you basically did television, when you did motion pictures, all rights reserved as far as what they knew, which was relevant, was the motion pictures. You didn't have anything else to put it. That's why those men are talking about went and bought the rights to, oh God, you're going to give me $1 million for the television? Like, God, you're an a-hole beyond belief.
They're like, okay.
I know that all of them mortgaged everything they had. I said, Roy Rogers said, I think I sold them Dell. I'm not sure. All I know is she was mad at me when she found out what I had mortgaged to get the rights, because she said, "Boy, you weren't old."
Yeah, but she was probably happy later.
Yeah, when everything belonged to them. So it allowed them to stop making movies and host the Roy Rogers
And
Theater.
if you think about it, who owns the Beatles library?
Yeah, Apple owns the Beatles library, and here's the fun. Michael Jackson owns. Here's the thing: Apple Music owns the Beatles library, but Apple Music is owned by Michael Jackson.
Which is why they never really had to worry about Michael Jackson being broke.
They said he could never spend as much money as he brought in because of, Apple Music was also Dusty Springfield. It was also the Dave Clark Five. It was all these British bands with all of this god-awful British Revolution, I'm Henry VIII, I am Henry VIII, I am, him, all of that stuff, folks. And then he made a deal with Sony to put it out. Sony basically was feeding everything he wanted to do for years. It's why you can be eccentric and don't have to worry about money. But and here's a good one. Michael Jackson was not stupid. No matter, he got the digital rights. He said all digital rights. And since cell phones were there, it covered cell phones.
Because that was digital rights.
Yeah, but it doesn't cover tablets. So they've had...
interesting.
Tablets did not exist. Cell phones did. Tablets came out. This is where they're talking about the people over at Comcast and Universal. We've been running around like chickens with our head cut off the last 2 years trying to secure all digital rights to fill out the rest of the platforms. And how they're talking about if they can't get a person to sign the digital rights on, that's flat out. If a TV series cannot get the person to sign off on them, they cut them out. They just flat cut them out.
Well, if you think about it too, because you're like, how difficult can it be? Well, let's see, part of it is some of the people are no longer alive.
Yeah.
And so they have to track down their family members.
I know.
And I don't think you can just track down one family member to get the permission,
No,
right? Because any of them can protest.
You have to find out, it's just like, there was a reason why the road pictures with Bing Crosby and Bob Hope were not shown for a lot of years, was because they didn't have television rights from a lot of the people that performed in the thing and the people that wrote music. I mean, they had to track down surviving members of families to get them signed off, and then some of the wills were, I left it to my family. Which members of the family did they mean? Like Benny Hill. Benny Hill died and left all rights, because he knew about the digital stuff. He left everything to his mother, who died the day after he did. And his mother left everything to him.
So what happened?
It got off a court battle for a long time, which is why you...
Because it goes to him and then it goes to her, and it's...
No, that's why you saw a lot of what Benny Hill didn't own. What he was doing. He was like a hired gun for the BBC for years until he moved to Thames. So the BBC, here's a good one. The BBC used to do this with this because they just liked Benny Hill so much. They would they'd shoot him with slingshots and stuff and bust the kinescopes. So there's a lot of early Benny Hill doesn't exist. But digital rights, it's a big deal. But now the latest battleground is apps. 2 years ago it was 3D. Today it is apps. We are not going to produce an app for your set unless we know that you're going to produce the sets to put the apps on, so we can put our content on, because the content has to be more precise. It's got to be created for that app to be looked at.
They want to optimize for that screen.
Yeah.
So here's the challenge, because we were talking about apps
Yeah.
the other day, because we were sitting there talking. You ever notice that when you're looking at the consumer electronics industry, there's a lot of options for iPhone and iPad, and a lot of people think, and we've been in circles where they thought, and they didn't realize an iPad was a tablet, and they also thought iPad was on Android, right? Which an iPad is on the Apple operating system. An iPad is a tablet, but there's other tablets. So there's iPad apps.
Yeah.
There's Android apps. There's what's BlackBerry called it in theirs? And HP had one.
Yeah.
RAM, whatever.
RAM systems. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Microsoft has them. And so, for example, like the equipment as far as The BlackBerry, their tablets have not sold as well because,
They're on a different operating system.
and there's not that many apps available. Even though there's quite a few people that own BlackBerries, they thought
And
they would sell.
it's what damaged the HP, because the HP had a system. HP used the Palm system, which is why the Palm, their tablet didn't work. Well, they gave the Palm. They actually became the largest manufacturer of tablets in the world when they dumped all of
Literally
those things.
overnight. But that was after two reasons. One is they dumped them, and so people didn't care so much about the number of apps. But someone also said that they had an app that could turn the HP.
Which they didn't
Into
know.
taking
What
Android.
happened was right after there was no more available, they all of a sudden put out, well, we've got an app for like $20 that anybody can turn their thing into a full-blown regular thing. Oh God! But it's just 3D was killed because there was like 14 different forms of 3D that can be shown, and what happened was the manufacturer decided to do, as I said, it was their decision was to make money, not to create a set to sell. So they did the active shutter glasses. Active shutter glasses meant that they could only work with the set that you were viewing on. They couldn't do a thing. We've got this, for instance, this camera can only be fed into a Panasonic Viera. It cannot be seen as is. No monitor. It will not function on any other monitor but that system.
Yeah, and this challenge for standards is not new. It happens in industry after industry with major development. I mean, a lot of you might be familiar with the VHS beta war, then there's the Blu-ray HD war,
Yeah.
and part of it is whoever creates the standards, and here's the challenges. By the time everybody agrees on a standard, there's usually something out there that's better that people want to race towards.
Yeah, and then here's the thing too, is what they also don't understand is that we were over in the automotive, the greening the brand thing over there, and they're talking about, that we need standards, because on automotive, because they're creating apps for automotive now too.
Oh yeah, that was the other part.
And there is no standard, but they have designed a system so that if you put it, they're only an app for their system, and it's a closed shop, folks, which means you can't